Jiu-Jitsu, I use his punch and kick.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the MMA Corner Recap Show. Tonight, we're double dosing you as we break down UFC Fight Night 53 and 54, break down all the action, give you everything that you need to know. As always, these episodes are brought to you by Battle Bomb, the only pain reliever with the knockout power, battlebomb.com. And then bonus side, go to the MMAcorner.com, halfway down the site, boom, Vitor's ugly face, click on it, all the products you need right there. Now, I'm your host, Josh Davis, alongside my co-host for the evening, news manager at the MMAcorner.com, Jose Young. Jose, how you doing, brother?
I am fantastic. It's nice to have two other people to talk to this time.
Bueno. And content coordinator, associate editor, ugly human being, Jason Shelkey.
It's good, man. I don't mind being ugly, you know. It's okay, cause I still kicked you in the face. I knocked you out. It's all good.
I think you need to get with Mr. Fontenez.
He does it so much better.
Now, guys, you know, if I'm being honest, which I always am, I give today a C minus. Just being honest, from top to bottom, both cards, every fight, C minus. Now there were some bright spots, there were some good finishes, but overall, you know, I got to be honest, there was some boredom, and any fights you don't want to see boredom, you want to see excitement. You want to see great things. You want to see submissions. You want to see knockouts and all of that kind of stuff. And we got that. But so much of it was overshadowed by some of these boring decisions. Now, offline, I was telling Jose that, you know, these judges definitely earned their paychecks today because they were doing a whole lot of work. But, Jose, give us your thoughts on the card.
On both cards?
On both cards.
Well, if you're just looking at the main cards, they were pretty much almost polar opposites. I mean, the UFC 153 in Sweden, I believe the first three fights were all TKO knockouts, and then the main event went into wasn't lackluster. It was just another split decision. Shouldn't have been a split decision where Rick Story won. So 3 straight knockouts and a decision, and then the UFC 54 in Halifax was a bunch of decisions, capped off by a third-round knockout, like an uppercut from hell from Rory McDonald or a Tarek Saffiedine. So both cards, it's unfortunate that they couldn't take all the knockouts from the Sweden card and just have them on the actual televised portion where fans could actually watch them, like instead they have to buy Fight Pass. And because of the baseball game that went 18 innings, the main card was aired on FX, and I guarantee you more people have FX than Fox Sports 1. They tune in, they see all these very boring fights, and they're like, oh, UFC sucks. It's just a bunch of guys humping each other against the fence. And if you had all those knockouts from Sweden on that card, it would have been so much better for the casual and diehard fans.
No, you bring up excellent points there, and I couldn't agree more. And, you know, like I said, I give this day of fights a C minus. Not all of that's on the UFC. While some of it's on the UFC, a lot of it's on these fighters. They didn't come to fight. They didn't come to perform. They didn't do the things that they needed to do to excite the fans. But Jose's right. If we took the 3 first fights from the main card of the Sweden, put it on FX, the UFC would have been doing happy dances, and Fox would have been like, this is gold. We're getting high ratings. Instead, I guarantee you they lost a lot of people that wanted to see something that they weren't, and no one wants to see 2 guys humping each other. It just isn't good for the sport. Shelky, give us your thoughts.
Well, maybe there are some people out there that want to see 2 guys humping each other. Don't judge. But I mean, lots of people are talking about oversaturation especially with the UFC nowadays, and you know, Dana White's quick to point out, oh well, you know, you don't have to watch all this, different fights for different cards. But for those people that do watch it, you know, there does seem to be a point of oversaturation, because if you are a fan even if you're not watching all the cards, you're still going to get, the cards you do want to watch are still going to be somewhat lackluster like the two we had today. And unfortunately, because the UFC is holding 50 some events a year, we're going to continue to see cards like this all the time, except for, with the possibility of pay-per-views. But, when you have so many fight cards, you need so many different fighters to fill all these spots, it's going to become the normal.
Well, and I will say this, uh, oversaturation goes both ways. Here's the deal. If these guys, these professional fighters, that in every interview they do, I just want to put on exciting fights for the fans, blah, 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 blah. If they did what they said they supposedly wanted to do and put on exciting fights instead of point fighting, instead of fighting not to lose, instead of, trying to do the bump and grind or whatever the latest dance move is inside the octagon, we wouldn't have so much oversaturation because we'd have exciting fights, and that's all people care about. Yes, everyone wants to see Anderson Silva or GSP, that kind of stuff. But true fight fans just want to see exciting. I don't care what your name is. If you put on exciting fights, I want to watch you. And that's what needs to happen with all these multiple cards. These guys need to put on exciting fights. They need to do the stuff that they say they're going to do. And when they don't, we have days like today. And again, I do blame the UFC for some of the matchmaking and that kind of stuff, but they can't get it perfect every time. No one can. It's still up to the fighters to come in and do exciting things. And some of them did, like the guy we're about to talk about, and some of them didn't, like other guys we're going to talk about. So let's start it right off. UFC Fight Night 53, Nelson versus Story. All right, opening up the main card on this event, Mike Wilkinson versus Nicholas Backstrom. Minute 19 seconds, knockout, beautiful, excitement. Obviously, Mike looked good in this fight, but again, it was only a minute 19 seconds. What can you say? Shelky, start us off.
There's really not too much you can say because what is there to really take away from a minute 19 blowout? You really don't have enough time to evaluate a fighter, really how good he could potentially be and how he could affect a division when you're only seeing him for a minute. I mean, yeah, he pounded the guy, beat the guts out of him, but so was that proof, You need to see a guy in a tough fight to see how he's going to be able to do in the division, in my opinion. So this, yeah, it was a good fight. It's awesome. It's always awesome seeing a knockout, but
Jose?
I mean, if anybody didn't see it, it was a weird knockout because Wilkinson had his back against, like, it wasn't directly on the cage, but he was on the outside and his opponent was in the middle of the center of the octagon, and his opponent came in with like this. He just charged forward with trying to score like a lunging like Superman punch, and it looked like Wilkinson just kind of closed his eyes and just kind of caught him with the temple and like shook him and he fell down and then just unconscious, like he was asleep. Like he came down with a hammer fist and put him, like he wasn't like dazed, like he was unconscious, like his lights were out. And it is a good story because I believe Wilkinson is the one that was on Tough Some Ashes who tore his retina or hurt his eye and had to be pulled out of the tournament. I think that was him. So it is a good story there because if you did watch it, and he does have he does have a lot of English fans. From what I heard, the place got pretty loud watching it. So, but yeah, like you both said, there's not really much to take out of it just because it was a minute 19 or whatever you said, and I would love to see him face a better opponent to see if he actually does have potential, or if he's just one of these Fight Pass cards where you put him on a European card because he's European. Like, I want to see him on like a legit prelim for a pay-per-view in order to determine if he has any potential.
Yeah, I want to see them give him a push. I want to see what this kid can do. Because to be real honest, I actually I thought Backstrom would probably be able to pull out this victory. And, what can I say? I was wrong. Backstrom got knocked out. It's just one of those things. So, again, great victory for Mike. Back to the drawing board for Nick. All right. Moving right along, we have Jan Blachowicz versus Yuri Latifi. Jose, start us off on this one.
This was a fight where, as soon as it happened, I was like, this happens 3 fights too late, because obviously Ilir Latifi rose to fame because he took that fight against Gegard Mousasi on like a week's notice and lost. And then he, like Patrick Cummins, he got that cult following because he took a fight against a former champion, a top 5 fighter, on such short notice, and people, I think, expected too much from him because he rattled off 3 straight wins over subpar opponents. And I just think Ilir Latifi losing by like a body kick, which very oddly shaped person. I said it on the preview show where he's too small for 205 pounds, but he's just so like wide that it would be impossible for him to be able to make 185. And I feel like he's the perfect 195er. But this is one of those fights where as soon as I saw it, I was like, I expected this to happen 3 fights ago, so it just didn't catch me by surprise.
Shelky.
You know, it doesn't surprise me that Jan was able to get this victory. I mean, Jose nailed everything on the head about Lafferty that we need to know. But something that everybody should know about Jan is that, yeah, he's won his last, 6 fights in a row.
Yeah, he's the real deal.
But his last loss, he quit on the stool against Sokaju, who, I mean, yeah, Sokaju came to prominence back in, like, Pride 33 when he knocked out Little Nog unexpectedly, but since then, I mean, let's face it, he's a journeyman at best. And so, I mean, that tells me
all I need to know. He got a victory in Bellator on Friday night.
Whoop-de-lotty-do.
Just throwing it out there.
But with that said, I mean, it was a good. I mean, you got to give props to the guy. That was his first fight in UFC, and you know, Lafferty. I mean, he's a big hulking monster that lacks a neck, and so you know, it's a good debut for him. You know, it's a good takeaway for him. It'll be something for him to build upon as he progresses in his career, and all props to him.
You know, this fight went pretty much the way I thought it would go. I was not surprised that Jan did what he did, and I wasn't surprised that it only took him 1 minute and 58 seconds to get it done either. I agree with Jose. I do think he's the real deal. Quitting on the stool against, Sokaju, it is what it is. I'm sure a lot of fighters have moments that they're not proud of, but it's one of those things. He's obviously rebounded well, reeling off 6 straight wins. So, again, another great victory for him. Moving right along, Max Holloway defeats Akari Kurasini. Shelky, start us off on this one.
Max Holloway's the real deal, man. Every time I see this guy, I just get more and more impressed by him, and I think it's only a matter of time before he's a player at 145. I mean, this is his 4th win in a row. His 2 losses in the UFC come from Dennis Bermudez and Conor McGregor. No shame in those.
He lost to Poirier in his debut.
Yes, thank you. I forgot about that one. But he's finally coming to his own. He's 22 years old. He's getting, or 23, 22. Yeah, and he keeps on getting better each time we see him inside the octagon. And I think, give him a year or two, and he's going to be definitely one of the best flyweights in the world. Featherweights.
Thank you, Jose.
Dude, I agree. I'm a big Max Holloway fan. And you said, like you said, his 3 losses were to Dustin Poirier, top 10 fighter, Dennis Bermudez, longest winning streak in the featherweight, and one of the longest streaks in the UFC, and then he just happened to run into the Conor McGregor freight train, and he wasn't even the original opponent for Conor McGregor. And I was there for the Dennis Bermudez fight, and I had Max Holloway winning that fight because it was a split decision. I know a lot of the media was like, I had that score for Max Holloway. So Dennis Bermudez's win streak could have been cut in half, and Max Holloway could have had this 6 out of 7 wins. And he did get beat by Conor McGregor, but he did go all 3 rounds. The only one to do it against in the UFC. And if anybody watched the preview one, I believe he broke Stephen Struve's record for most fights in the UFC by the time he's 22. It's his 10th fight in the UFC, and he's at an age where most people are graduating college. And he's one of those. He's in the mold of BJ Penn, where anytime, any place, he doesn't care if you're ranked or not. This is 4th win in 2014. I think that ties him with Cerrone and is it Neil Magny? Is that his name?
Yep.
That's also 4-0. So 4th straight win, and I believe it's his 4th straight finish, if I'm not mistaken. So I agree with Shelky. He's if not the future, I don't even think he's the future anymore. I think he's like legit the present right now, and he's gonna have a very, very bright run in the UFC.
Yeah, the sky's the limit for this kid, and he is still a kid. He's 22 years old. By all accounts, he's still an adolescent. He hasn't grown into his adult body. I mean, the world is this kid's oyster. He truly does have everything in front of him, and I do expect one day he probably will be a champion at some point. I love him. I think he's great. I think he's good for the UFC. I think he's good for mixed martial arts. He reminds me so much of the Diaz brothers. He just comes to fight. That's all he wants to do. He wants to throw punches. Love it. Great win for him. I want to see him again now fight some more top competition. We know that he's better than all the mid-level guys. Now let's see where he is in the top 10. Let's start giving him that kind of push. All right, moving right along. Main event. It was a solid main event. It really was. Rick Story, Gunnar Nelson. Couple questionable scorecards from the judges, so to speak. But, again, I'm not a judge. I'm an idiot with a computer and a website. So I do have the privilege of running my mouth about how much they suck. But really, I'm in no position to critique them. I did score the first round for Gunnar, gave the rest to Rick Story. I thought he was pretty dominant in the fight. I thought if he really wanted to push the pace, he probably could have finished Gunnar. But, it is what it is. When you're winning the fight, you just want to make sure that you don't get yourself clipped and end up losing the fight that you shouldn't. So, hats off to Rick. I didn't think he was going to win this fight. I actually thought Gunnar would win. That was my prediction. But Rick's getting back to the fighter that he once was. He's getting back to the fighter that everyone thought could be a force in the welterweight division. And moving over to MMA labs in Arizona has really helped this cat out. He's a beast. If I'm a welterweight, I wouldn't want to fight him right now. He can take a punch. He never stops coming forward. He's big. He's strong. He's got great wrestling. I don't know. We'll see where he goes from here. Jose.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I, too, scored the first round for Gunnar Nelson, and then the rest were just all horror story. And I don't know which judge gave that 50-45 story or even scored it for Gunnar Nelson. That was a little odd to me, but it didn't look like Gunnar was like overmatched in that. I mean, he showed he belonged in there, but he did look kind of he is small for welterweight. I know he barely cuts anything to make 170. So you could see, I don't think he will drop down anytime soon, but he did look a little undersized for a man of like Rick Story's. Because Rick Story's a strong guy, and it was one of those fights where like when they gave Kelvin Gastelum Rick Story, they were like, we're gonna give. He was basically the gatekeeper, where if you can beat Rick Story, you're legit. You'll get a top 15, top 10 opponent. And some people scored that fight for Rick Story. It was a split decision loss to Kelvin Gastelum. And then he has the split decision loss to Mike Pyle, which a lot of people also scored for Rick Story. So right now we're talking about Rick Story's resurgence win over an upcoming fighter, when we could really be talking about Rick Story like 5 wins in a row. Like he lost to Damian Maia and then pulls off 5 fights, and he's in one of those Matt Brown categories where his career was like plateauing. He wasn't going anywhere, and all of a sudden it's 5 straight wins, maybe a couple wins away from being in that top 5 welterweight talk. So, but he pulled it off, and look, Gunnar Nelson's going to have to go back to the drawing board.
Yeah, he is. He definitely is. Shelky.
Yeah, to me when I was watching the fight, it looked like around the 4th round that Nelson kind of checked out of the fight. He was done.
Yeah.
And he had the demeanor of a. What was that, Josh?
I said it was after he got dropped and Story started pummeling him.
Yeah,
He never
that was
recovered.
yeah, and his demeanor by about the fourth round, he wasn't there. He was just going through. It just seemed to me like he was just going through the motions. But you know, with Rick Story, I mean, let's not forget this dude. I mean, he started his UFC career with a loss, but then he went on six straight. He went on a six-fight win streak, and he beat Johnny Hendricks and Thiago Alves during that streak. So, I mean, he holds a victory over the reigning welterweight champion. And, you know, like 2014 has been the year of the resurgence, and who knows if this is going to be the beginning of Rick Stories. It could very well be. I mean, I'd like to see him get in there against, I mean, uh, Nelson was number 12, so I'd like to see him get in there with someone, you know, maybe like a Jordan Mean,
I
or
give him Safadine. He just lost.
yeah, or Safadine, or Dong Hyun Kim. You know, one of those guys.
Yeah.
You know, I wouldn't be opposed to seeing Story fight any of those guys, and I think that it would be a good test to see if he deserves, you know, discussed as one of the best welterweights in the UFC.
I think the only thing keeping Rick Story back in the minds of fans, because when you hear Rick Story, yeah, he's on this resurgence, and he does deserve to be in the talks of fighting the Jordan Means and Dong Young Kings of the world. But in the minds of fans, like, I know in my mind, when I hear Rick Story, the very first thing I think of is not, oh, he beat Johnny Hendricks. It's, oh, he lost to Charlie Brenneman when Charlie Brenneman took that fight on 24 hours notice, basically. Like, that broke his winning streak, and that's going to be hard for him to shake. For, like, even if he pulls out a few wins, he's going to need a dominant win over a good fighter if he wants to shake that, in my mind.
You know, I love how people bring that up. Oh, he lost to a guy who took the fight on 24 hours notice. He was already set to be on the card. So essentially, they both took the fight on 24 hours notice because neither one of them knew anything about the other one. It's not like they pulled Charlie Brenneman out of the street. You know.
But see, we're smart. We're the smart ones, and we get all the guys out there who hear, oh, I bet he cut 30 pounds in 24 hours and beat Rick Story, which isn't the case. But you know there's people out there that think that.
Yeah, no, there is. And so, but you're right. Because of that, he's always going to have to live that down, and he's a long way to go, even in some of our colleagues' eyes, because of that same thing. So, I do think that today's victory does take him a long way in the right direction. But again, he's got to put together some more wins. He's got to get a couple more wins together. He does have the 2 questionable decision losses, but they're on his record. He's got to put the streak together. But yeah, like you said, those 3 guys would be excellent fights for him. I would see either one of them. All right, fans, that's what we got for UFC Fight Night 53. Moving right along to UFC Fight Night 54. Now, for those of you who stayed awake during the card, I know it was hard to do with some of the snooze fest fights that we had going on. Still, there was some excitement, and let's get right into the action. Starting off the card was Mitch Gagnon versus Roman Salazar. Again, another quick fight. Took him 2 minutes and 6 seconds. But it was 2 minutes and 6 seconds of complete schoolyard domination. I mean, he went in there, completely outclassed him. I don't even think he broke a sweat. And this is no disrespect to Roman Salazar, but honestly, I think I would have done better had I been in there. So Mitch looked good. He looked excellent. Shelky, what do you think?
I mean, he was fighting a guy who was making his UFC debut on short notice. So I can't really. I mean, well, yeah, Gannon. I mean, he went in there, whooped that ass. He did what he was supposed to do. Plain and simple. I mean, there's nothing else to really say about it. He went in there, he took care of business. You know, did his 2 minutes worth of work, got the finish, got his paycheck, bada bing, bada boom, done. Jose.
Yeah, as a journalist writing about it, you love these fights where it's not a marquee matchup. And it's not like it's not a marquee match. When you have Dana White tweeting, "I can't wait for Mitch Gagnon and Roman Salazar," and then the overwhelming response is, "What are you? Who are you talking about?" Like, it's just like those aren't UFC fighters. But as a writer, you love these fights because it's not a marquee matchup and it ends immediately, and then you move on. Like pretty much as soon as the fight is over, I forgot that fight had happened. I mean, yeah, Mitch Gagnon, like Josh said, just like blew him away. Like it was like he tackled him, threw on a rear naked choke, called it a day, and just went home. Like it was just like that fight lasted. I don't even like a minute, like 60 seconds. So Mitch Gagnon is underrated. I think he's very underrated. I would love to see him get a real good a better opponent, obviously, but there's not much to say about that. Just that Mitch Gagnon dominated.
Yeah, that's all you can say about it. Is Mitch dominated? He deserves a real opponent. But it always makes me laugh when it takes fighters longer to walk out, do their little dance, get lubed up, get announced than it does to actually fight. So, hey, whatever. All right, moving right along, Nordine Talib versus Lil Yulane. Who started us off last time?
I'll take this one. I don't even know. Like I remember, I think this was one of the first fights this year where I just checked out in like halfway through the fight. I mean, I looked up. I'm like, what round is this? Is this over yet? And I look, and it's like a minute into the second round. And I'm just like, Christ, there's still 2 rounds of this. Like both of these guys were just throwing. They both came out, and like Brian Stan said, they were like being methodical, and they were like planning their attacks, and then as soon as they got hit, they just went into the survival mode. They would just start throwing all these wild punches. They'd shoot for takedowns and catch. It was just such a weird fight. I don't even think Nordine Talib won. I mean, he got a few takedowns, but Yi Jianliang like hit him harder. But in the end, the real losers were the fans because that fight was so boring in my mind.
Oh, definitely. If I saw the fight on the street, I would have walked away. And that's really, and again, I don't want to sound disrespectful because these guys are in the UFC. They're fighting their asses off for us. But again, that was terrible, and it did remind me of a street fight. It reminded me of 2 dudes who wanted to act like they trained UFC and frickin' try and throw some legitimate kicks and see that stuff doesn't work, and then, like you said, just go into survival mode. Head down, eyes closed, throwing windmills, and that's what it was like. And yeah, I checked out. At one point I was completely doing something else, and actually, I'll tell you what I was doing. I switched over to check the score of the game and forgot the fight was going on. And when I went back, I missed the first minute of the second round, but I didn't miss much. So it was again, no disrespect to the guys, but oh my God. All right, Shelky.
Well, I give first because, of course, you got to give respect to anybody that's willing to go in there and go and train and do their best. But this fight was forgettable. Maybe I don't know if it had to do with styles or whatever the case may be. It was both their second fight inside the UFC. Maybe they still had some jitters. I don't know, but it was forgettable because I don't remember the fight at all. I don't remember anything that happened. It just wasn't the best performance on either of the behalves. So maybe they can come back and put on a better performance in their next fight, but the performance they put on against each other was not exciting whatsoever.
Which is a shame because Li Jianliang is from China, and the UFC has all the Japanese fighters, and they have the Korean fighters like in the Korean Zombie and Dong Yang Kim, but they need a Chinese star. They need like a Chinese Korean Zombie if they want to break into mainland China. Like you see, ONE FC is holding an event in like Hong Kong, and they're trying to move into Beijing and everything. The UFC needs that, so they're not. If you hear we're going to Macau, that's people. I hear people say Macau. They don't even consider Macau like legit China. Like Hong Kong and Beijing is China. They need that Chinese superstar, and Li Jianliang could have been that one, and he's been in 2 very subpar decisions so far. So the UFC is going to have to keep looking.
Yeah, they need to keep searching. That fight was forgettable. I've forgotten about it. I won't remember it tomorrow. So let's talk about another forgettable fight. Between Elias Theodore and Bruno Santos, I got to be honest. I don't know what to say about this fight. I mean, yes, Elias went out there, um, trying to do his thing. It just was another, eh, fight. So kudos to him for getting the win. But I really don't have much to say about it. Shelby.
I'm right there with you, man. I mean, Thoreau, he went out there. I mean, he's still a developing prospect. What, he won Tough Nations, if memory serves.
Yes.
So, I mean, he's still developing as a fighter or whatever. Um, he's only had 11 fights, 10 fights, 11 fights.
10 and 0.
Okay. Yeah. So, well, no, now he's 11 and 0 after this fight.
No, he's 10. He was 9 and 0 going in, so now he's 10 and 0.
Okay, so he's 10 and 0. So obviously, he still has some developing to do. He's a tough winner. Mostly we all know that when these guys come out of tough, they need some fights to really develop and everything. And I think that this was just a matchup for him to go in there, get some some more octagon experience, and hopefully he'll be a little more exciting in his next fight, I guess, would be the best way of putting it. But, he did what he was supposed to do. So they gave him the perfect matchup to do what he was supposed to do.
What was that? Put people to sleep? Jose, give us your thoughts.
Yeah, and I knew.
I was just going to say when.
Oh, okay.
So when they announced this matchup, I knew this fight was going to be boring because if anybody watched Tough Nations, Elias had no competition. Like, he just dominated everybody. So his big thing coming out of that was he's a little undersized for middleweight. I mean, so people, when he won, and he had no competition. They were like, well, what's he going to do when he fights real competition? And so I was curious for when he came back for his post-tough challenge, and they gave him Bruno Santos. I'm like, come on. He is the definition of lay and pray. I mean, if you saw his fight at 175 against Kamosi, even Kamosi was like pissed. He's like, I can't believe that happens. Like, I'm not even bruised. I'm not even sweaty. They just had this pig-looking man just lay on top of me, doing nothing. And I don't know. I knew that fight was going to be boring. And I thought Elias lost the first round, honestly, or the second round. But he won, and like Chelsea said, he should do more. I hope he comes back a little more exciting against a better opponent than Bruno Santos.
And one more thing really quick. You knew this fight was doomed to go to a decision whenever Santos, he's had 16 career fights, 14 of them have gone to a decision.
Yeah, he is the definition of lay and pray. He doesn't, when he gets on top of you, he doesn't even punch. He just kind of like passes guard or tries to pass guard and then stands up and then holds you against the fence. John Fitch would fall asleep watching this guy fight, and that's saying something.
Truly not the guy you want to share a cell with, if you know what I mean.
Maybe he's a lover, not a fighter. Who knows,
True.
Even more of a reason why you don't want to share a cell with it. All right, moving right along, Chad Laprise and Sedona. Jose, start us off with this.
I actually kind of enjoyed this fight because after that, the last two were snoozers. I was getting a little down on this card, and Sedano is Hispanic, and I always kind of pull for Hispanic fighters going into a fight. And Laprise was also, like, he looked pretty impressive on Tough Nations, and I was curious. And so for Bruno Santos in the last fight against the Tough winner was incredibly boring and didn't put much of a fight. Sedano, like, he was game, like, he tried. I mean, in the third round, he kind of got gassed, and you kind of knew he was going to lose, and he didn't fight like a man that was down 2 rounds. But for those first 2 rounds, it was a pretty exciting fight. I mean, he shot for takedowns, he threw kicks, and Laprise dominated pretty much the whole fight with leg kicks, but Sedano, like, it was surprisingly more of an exciting fight than I expected. But Laprise looked impressive.
Yeah, I want to see more of Laprise. I like this kid. I think he's got a lot to offer. He's got a lot of potential. And Sedano, first off, props to this dude. He fought his ass off for the first 2 rounds. The third round, he was beaten. He was taking some shots that he didn't like. He was looking to clinch up. Had no problem going to the ground because he knew he could could hold position and not take punishment. I can't blame him for that. Sometimes you know you're not going to get a finish. Sometimes you know that it's not your night. And so instead of just getting pummeled, hold on and try and survive. And that's what he did. No disrespect for that whatsoever. I do want to see him back again because I think he's a performer. I think he does have something to offer fight fans. But Laprice, he looked good. I want to see more of this cat. Shelky.
I don't mind agreeing with Jose because I actually like him, but I hate agreeing with you, Josh, because I hate you. But you guys basically summed up everything I could say. Both the guys, they went out there, they performed. I want to know, honestly, what I want to know is what was up with Sedano's hair. That's what bugged me throughout the whole fight. I mean,
he went last airbender in it.
And I was like, he has like blotches of hair all over his head, and I didn't know. I was like, is this on purpose? Does he have what's that called where you just lose random patches of hair on your head? I forget what it's called, but I was, that kind of distracted me. But back on a serious note, I do want to see both these guys again. I think they both have potential. Out of all the decisions that were, the 5 decisions that were on this main card, this was probably the most enjoyable one to watch.
Agreed, 100%.
Moving right along, co-main event. Rafael Assunção versus Brian Caraway. I will say this. I have to give it up for Brian because he did a lot better than I thought he would. I thought Assunção was going to whoop him. Caraway came to fight. He was moving forward the whole time. He was the aggressor. He was trying, even in the 3rd round, he was trying to win. He was trying to do anything he could to get the fight position where he could dominate. He just could not do it. I'm still not a fan of Caraway. He just doesn't do it for me. I still think he's a little overrated, but tonight he certainly came to fight, and I have to give him props. So congrats to Caraway on the performance. Assunção, he again got the seventh straight victory inside the octagon. He's going to have to wait for the title shot though, because that belongs to Dominic Cruz. So, Shelky, give us your thoughts.
Yeah, he's got to get the winner of Cruz and Dillashaw. I mean, he's won 7 in a row. And if you look at the division, I mean, let's take a look here at bantamweight. I mean, you got Uriah Faber above him. Uriah's not getting a title shot, so I mean, by process of elimination, Assunção has to get the next title shot. And as far as Caraway goes, he actually surprised me. I did not think that he was going to come in and fight as well as he did. And that's the reason why I'm not going to start cracking jokes about him, because I respect that his skills that he displayed tonight. I thought Assunção was just going to beat the living crap out of him. That didn't happen. He actually had moments where he looked somewhat decent. So, I'm with you. I'm not as a fan, I'm not big on Caraway, but he didn't look. I mean, he put up a much better fight than I thought he would against his given opposition. So, gotta give him props to that. And Assunção, I mean, he's title shot bound. Can't deny him now.
Jose.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm not the biggest Caraway guy. I don't really have an opinion on the guy. Just that he shouldn't have fish hooked that last fight. That's the only really thing I got on him. And he's the guy that used to throw up on Tough before every fight. Which initially, when I saw that, I was like, this guy's not even gonna make it in the UFC. But proved me wrong, and I agree with both of you. I mean, he had nothing to lose in this fight, and he fought like it. He ate a lot of head kicks and a lot of knees, and he just kept coming forward. Except the only thing I would say is when he would fight, he wouldn't put his hands up. He would lean forward, and his head would be in front of his feet, right in the path of Assunção's knees, and he would just eat them continuously and just keep walking forward. No idea where he was going with that strategy, but Assunção won, and I would honestly, because Cruz and Dillashaw don't have a date. It's probably going to be sometime in 15. I wouldn't mind seeing Assunção fight Barao for the #1 contender, because Barao's not going Barao's probably the 3rd best fighter in that weight class. He has 2 wins over Faber. And I would not mind seeing Assunção Barao as the co-main event of the Cruz Dillashaw fight. I think that would just be a fun card.
But would you want to be the guy fighting that guy that got knocked out by a bathtub?
I mean,
No, no.
no, but Barao does have the name, and he was being
True that.
touted as like he's one of those guys. I feel like yeah, I agree with both of you that Assunção has done more than enough to earn the title shot. I mean, he has a win over T.J. Dillashaw. That alone should be enough. If it wasn't for Cruz taking 3 years off, coming back and just beating up of Takeya Mizugaki, a poor Takeya Mizugaki, then Assunção would be fighting. Assunção would be fighting for the belt next, not Cruz, but that's not the case, and Assunção realizes that, and I think Barao would be one of the few fighters that you would have to say yes to, just because he does have the name, and he was being billed as the number one pound-for-pound fighter by Dana White.
Well, a couple of things. First off, I thought Dillashaw beat Assunção. I thought he won that fight. It just my personal opinion. Now, as far as title shots go, Renan Barão, he's on Dana White's shit list. To be real honest, he's at the back of the bus. He's going to have to fight a couple times before he gets a title shot. He's not even in the title talk at this point in time. So with that being said, who gets the next title shot seriously depends on who wins this fight and what the UFC can build. Now, if TJ Dillashaw wins the fight, it's a no-brainer. It's Rafael Assunção. It's the fight TJ wants. It's the fight fans want to see. That's the fight that's going to happen. If Dominic Cruz wins this fight, I would not be surprised if the UFC pushes Uriah Faber. There's still the unfinished business there. You know, they were obviously supposed to fight after coaching the Tough Live series. I would not be surprised, even though Uriah probably doesn't deserve a title shot over other guys because it will sell seats. It will make money. I would not be surprised if that's the fight that the UFC did. Plus, it's a fight that Uriah, well, I'm sure Uriah wants it, but it's definitely a fight that Dominic Cruz wants. And Dana White has a special spot in his heart for Dominic Cruz, and I can certainly see Dana giving Dominic pretty much whatever it is that he asks for. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Moving right along. Main event, Rory McDonald, Tarek Saffiedine. Jose, start us off on this one.
I was actually pretty intrigued by this fight. I love Tarek Saffiedine's style. I love how he'll just throw like 3 straight question mark kicks back to back to back. It's very unorthodox kicking, but it's not unorthodox to him or people who know his style of fighting. And obviously, his bread and butter is the leg kicks. You heard Faraz Zahabi tell Rory McDonald, "You're giving him too many leg kicks. You can't give him. You're giving him 3 or 4 leg kicks around. You can't keep doing that. That's his bread and butter. Like you gotta watch for those." And Rory McDonald did. He came out. He was actually a lot more emotional in this fight than I expected him. He was staring down Saffiedine between every round, and he was talking to him during the fight. You saw it. And he just caught, like I said earlier in this, he just caught Saffiedine with an uppercut from hell in the 3rd round. And he told his coach going into the 3rd round, he's like, "I'm going to put him away this round." And he did. He just blasted that guy against the fence. And he's the next in line for the title. He's going to have to wait a while, but you never know. Somebody could get hurt, and Rory McDonald could just jump right in there.
Shelky.
You know, after watching, after Roy McDonald came into the cage and he was standing there waiting to be announced and everything, that stare, I mean, that is, if I'm on the opposite side of the cage of him, I am scared. I'm crapping my pants. I think I actually tweeted out that if I ran into Roy McDonald in the back alley, I'd just throw my wallet at him and run. I wouldn't want anything to do with that. But, while Roy did look good in this fight, and I think that he will be next for a title shot. To me, his problem is that he is plainer than vanilla. He has no personality. He has nothing about his demeanor, his personality, anything that fans can really get behind it, except for his performance in the ring. But we all know that personality will get you a lot more in the UFC than your fighting abilities. See Chael P. Sonnen, for example. I mean, and so while I think that McDonald is poised for a title shot. I don't really know if the UFC wants the belt around his waist because the dude has zero personality, has zero fan appeal outside of Canada, where his fellow Canadians love him, and I think that they would be stuck with possibly the most unmarketable champion that they have, which besides, unfortunately, as much as I hate to say it, Demetrius Johnson, just because people hate the lower weight classes for whatever reason.
I
But
think
yeah,
the
McDonald
only
gets a nice shot.
the only if the only way you can market McDonald to the masses and build him up is if you get George St. Pierre on the commercial saying, "I trained with this guy and he's the legit." Like people will, even casual fans will listen to George St. Pierre talk. Like I've talked to people who only know who George St. Pierre is. I've had a guy tell me George St. Pierre is the heavyweight champion of the world. He was an idiot, but he knew who George St. Pierre was. And if you put George St. Pierre in a commercial building up Rory McDonald, or you bill Rory McDonald as the next GSP, that would be the only logical path the UFC could take in marketing Rory McDonald, other than the fact that he's going to sell in Canada, but you can't just sell in Canada. You have to sell everywhere. So I do agree with Shelky that he is rather bland for a champion, which is why they need GSP to build him up.
I have one thing really quick.
All right, go ahead, and then I'm going to blast.
Okay, the only way I think that they can market Rory McDonald is if they, start superimposing his face over this. Then you got one hell of a marketable fighter.
Yeah.
Oh, come on now.
Oh, come on. My brother's a little slack here. I'm trying to help out this vanilla brother.
Terrible.
I think Stephan Bonner's got that corner marketed, though.
No, for real, I have to say I completely disagree with you guys. Here's the thing. When GSP first fought Matt Hughes, he had no marketability, couldn't even speak English. Outside of Canada, nobody really knew who he was, and the kid was a beast. It was his performance inside the octagon that made him so marketable, plus the fact that women found him attractive. Rory has the same thing. Women, which is huge, love this kid, think he's gorgeous, want to be with him. And to be honest, whether people admit it or not, most men want to be him. They wish that they were Rory. I think this guy has a lot of marketability. It's just a matter of doing it right, and a lot of it relies on his octagon performance. If he reels off 15 straight octagon wins, it doesn't matter. The UFC will have no problem marketing him. He is good looking. He's young. They can tell him what to do. They can coach him up. I think that they'll have no problem marketing this kid. It's not like some of the other people that they have to deal with trying to market. Now, for every Chael Sonnen, they are so few and far between. You can't, unless that's your true personality, you can't try and be like The Rock or like a Chael or something, because you're going to fall short. Rory just needs to be Rory, continue to win, continue to have that intense stare when he's inside the octagon, and be the goof that he is outside. So I think the kid's going to be fine. I do think he deserves the next title shot. I imagine that'll probably be in May of next year. We have Hendricks and Lawler at the end of the year in December, and so I figure as long as no one gets hurt, May would probably make sense.
And I would like to add, he needs to do a lot better job in picking his walkout music, because this is the second fight in a row that he has walked out to the worst Metallica song of all time. So he lost a fan in me for a little bit every time he walks out to that, but that's just me.
And he needs a little more conviction whenever he's asking for a title shot instead of, yes, I would like the next title shot.
No, he used please because he's Canadian.
Okay, yeah. And then he said sorry.
What you remember what George did,
That's true. That's what I was going to say. George got down on one knee, and that's, in my mind, that's when I started to become a fan of George St. Pierre, when he got down on one knee and tried.
He showed emotion.
Yep.
And people could see on TV that it was true emotion.
Yeah, it was raw emotion. He was speaking the best English he possibly could.
He was,
Mm-hmm.
And I love GSP. I know him well. Him and Nate Marquardt are great buddies. GSP spends a lot of time here in Colorado training at Grudge. Uh, but truthfully, GSP doesn't have a whole lot of personality either. He's very shy. He's very reserved. He's not a extroverted person by any stretch of the means. Again, I think it's just about how the UFC goes about it. Now, Rory's got a long way to go before they even need to think about that. He's still got to beat either Robbie Lawler, which he's proven is not easy, and then if it's not Robbie, he's got to beat Johnny Hendricks. So it's not like he's got the title around his waist yet. He's still got some work to do. But I do think that he's got. I do think he matches up well against both people. Obviously, we saw the fight with Lawler. He certainly wasn't losing until he got clipped. I mean, he wasn't winning the fight either, but there were some things that he could build on for the next one. If he fights Johnny, I think he matches up good there too. Just don't get clipped with the overhand right, and he'll be okay. So I do think that he's got potential in both of those fights, but we'll have to wait and see. All right, Shelky, final thoughts.
Final thoughts. It is Central Time, 1:27 a.m. I believe the fight started at 11 a.m. It's a long day of fights. If you want to keep the fans engaged and happy, having these two fight cards on the same day is a lot for people to take in. So while I'm not a huge fan of it, they're going to keep on doing whatever they want to do. But with that said, the first fight card, 53, mediocre. 54 had its moments where it was all right, but, pretty uneventful, unexciting night of fights with except for a few high spots here and there.
Jose, give us your final thoughts.
Final thoughts is Patty Houlihan, and I am blanking on his name, put on one hell of a scrap on the prelim card of UFC in Halifax, which I was honestly surprised that they put that fight on in Halifax, because since they just had the fight in Sweden, and Houlihan's teammate is Gunnar Nelson and Cathal Pendred, and his head coach was in Sweden. So I was surprised they separated the two fighters and helped put them on cards on the same day. But Patty Houlihan, and I'm trying to find his name, but I can't find it. Oh, Chris Kalades put on a pretty solid scrap. Houlihan won the first round, dominated the first round. Kalades dominated the second round, and then Kalades dominated the third round. And Kalades took the fight on a week's notice, and Houlihan was undefeated, and he had his people saying that I believe it was, flyweight, that he's the type of fresh air the flyweight needs, one of those strong-talking Irishmen, Conor McGregor style, in the flyweight division. And his opponent, on 1 week's notice, put a big halt to that, and it was a pretty fantastic thing to witness.
There you go, fans. Like I said, it's a solid day of fights. I can never complain when all I do on a Saturday is sit on my ass and watch fights all day long with some college football. I mean, seriously, what more could you ask for? So I have absolutely no complaints. But again, all in all, I give it a C, a C-. Now, with that being said, if you didn't see UFC Fight Night 53, it's still on Fight Pass. Go check it out. If you missed UFC Fight Night 54, well, you're pretty much out of luck, except for the video highlights that we will post on the MMAcorner.com here in a few minutes. Now, with that being said, a little housekeeping. No, the UFC is off until October 25th, UFC 179. So we will be back to give you predictions for that. And then obviously immediately following the event, we will be back to give you breakdowns. In the meantime, though, still a lot of MMA going on. Next weekend you have Next weekend you have Bellator 128, then you have RFA 19, you have World Series of Fighting 14. Then the following week, ONE FC's coming back, Legacy again with Bellator. So your MMA needs are definitely taken care of. Now, for all your MMA news needs, definitely go to the MMAcorner.com, your home for all things MMA. We have you covered. Breaking news done by our man Jose. he's on top of it. He's got it covered. Everything else you need, interviews, recaps, whatever, MMAcorner.com. Definitely make sure that you check that out. All right, guys, for Jose Young, for Jason Shelkey, I am this. Keep living the MMA Corner lifestyle. Peace.